Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Aina Dira binti Ahmad Suhaimi, and today I will discuss to you two special conditions called ASMR and Misophonia. So this is the content of the presentation for today, and I hope you all enjoy today's presentation and take something meaningful away from the course content. Alright, so first and foremost, I am sure that the first question comes to your mind is, what is misophonia? So misophonia was taken from a Greek word which are miso, literally translated to hatred, and phone, which means sounds. So according to Johnson in 1999, the condition also known as selective sound sensitivity syndrome. So this condition led to a neurophysiological and behavioral syndrome upon hearing specific repetitive pattern-based sounds, regardless of their loudness. So the condition can lead to psychosocial implications like anxiety, depression, social isolation, and also reduced quality of life. So based on study of Kumar, most commonly reported that the age of onset is approximately 12 years old. However, it does not exclude the lifespan ranging from 5 years old into a late adulthood. So auditory and visual triggers are both common, although auditory triggers typically come first and the visual triggers will develop over time. So the auditory triggers are often soft, repetitive, pattern-based sound produced in the context of typical everyday behavior, which is often very difficult to avoid. For instance, chewing or keyboard typing, and breathing. So they are often human-generated sounds. However, it can also be triggered by animals and mechanical noises. So for your information, each individual with misophonia typically has their own unique set of triggers, and the meaning, context, and the interpretation of the behavior will often influence the response. So to illustrate, so the patient with misophonia will experience that his or her mother's chewing might be the trigger, but the friend or any other like sister will not be the trigger. So one of the mysteries of misophonia is that people seem to be more commonly triggered by individuals that they maintain close relationship with. For example, family members and spouse and also close friends. In 2015, Dozier had surveyed participants with visual triggers and noted that open-mouth chewing was the most common visual trigger repeated among participants. So it is important to note that visual triggers are often paired with auditory triggers, meaning that visions that occur immediately before, during, or following an aversive auditory stimulus are most common. So if the sound of chewing is an auditory trigger for someone, then the sight of the jaw movement associated with chewing may become a visual trigger. So as an example, in a crowded room, we imagine that we are in a crowded room where the auditory component could be completely inaudible, so the sight of jaw movement alone or food entering the mouth may elicit the misophonic response. So the trigger will worsen when they are tired, and it can improve when they were able to locate the sound source. So here I stated misokinesia. Misokinesia is the hate of movement. Any visible movement could be a trigger such as chewing mouth, and some research has questioned whether misokinesia is in its independent condition or if it is possibly variation of misophonia, but more research is still needed to further define this. Alright, next, this figure shows how the auditory brain and nervous system work upon hearing sounds. As we can see, our brain will distinguish meaning of sounds, and there is different reaction or response to it, non-meaningful and threatening sound, where the system will ignore the sound if it is non-threatening. In contrast, upon hearing threatening sound or salient sound, the nervous system will attend to it or activate an acute or fight or flight response. So this stress response or fight or flight response will result in a condition of a physical and emotional reflex response, which are outside of the individual's control and cause severe physiological changes like sweating and increased heart rate. So this is the auditory brain and nervous system in individual with misophonia. We can note that the brain of individual with misophonia misinterprets sounds like chewing, breathing, and perceive them as threatening. So the physical effect or the physical reflex and extreme emotional response will result in physiological changes for the sympathetic nervous system as part of the stress response that we discussed earlier. So it will cause symptoms like elevated blood pressure, pressure in the chest, and sweating. In the worst case, which often will lead to maladaptive behavior like fleeing from the environment and verbal aggression. So patients or people with misophonia, they develop coping mechanisms including mimicry, avoidance, self-distraction, positive internal dialogue, and verbal requests to stop the behavior. Alright, so that is the overview of misophonia. Contrary to misophonia, those with ASMR experience feelings of relaxation and euphoria to specific sensory stimuli. So they feel happy or relaxed, especially for the auditory model. And I am sure that you may have even ever seen or heard of ASMR clips trending online, right? With individual feeding themselves, eating fried chicken or noodles, slurping to noodles, or whispering into highly sensitive microphones in hopes of eliciting a relaxive and positive experience, right? So ASMR is a perceptual condition in which specific stimuli, ASMR, will reliably elicit relaxing and pleasurable tingling sensations that are initially localized to the head and neck region and may spread secondarily to other regions of the body. So ASMR triggers vary from person to person and may be auditory, visual, tactile, and or olfactory in nature. So the difference is instead of feeling distracted, people with ASMR find certain sound like chewing or slurping noodles is relaxing, right? So another study in 2018 using fMRI to evaluate patients with ASMR versus control and revealed functional brain changes within the population. So differences were observed in three primary brain areas: responses for emotional arousal, processing rewards, and reinforcing positive stimulus. So we will touch on brain changes in those with misophonia as well. But before we do, I wanted to mention that some researchers and clinicians have proposed the idea of a spectrum-like disorder from an audiophysiological standpoint, where those without any extreme reactions to sound fall somewhere in the middle, so they are like normal, no extreme of hating sound or liking sound. So then those with ASMR and misophonia could fall into separate and distinct ends of the spectrum. So the strange thing about ASMR is that many of the same sounds that are considered soothing and satisfying have the complete opposite effect in those with misophonia, resulting in, for the misophonia, they feel anxiety and anger, but for the ASMR, they feel it is relaxing and soothing. So furthermore, we can see that ASMR-related brain studies found that there are significantly increased activation in a specific areas of the brain during moments of ASMR tingling compared to non-tingling moments. The brain regions found most active during the tingling sensations were the nucleus accumbens, medial prefrontal cortex, insula, and secondary somatosensory cortex. So these are the first results to demonstrate a unique neural activation associated with the experience of ASMR. As we can see here, the contrast of ASMR participants' response to ASMR videos A, B, C show greater activity in the cingulate gyrus as well as the cortical region related to audition, movement, and vision. So the contrast of ASMR and control participants' response to ASMR eliciting videos detected a greater activity on cingulate gyrus, right paracentral lobule, and bilateral thalamus in ASMR. However, for the control participant, it showed greater activity in the lingula and culmen of the cerebellum. Alright? So now we proceed with the brain activity for misophonia. In contrast, from the recent study in 2019, the brain of people with misophonia shows greater myelination of gray matter in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is a brain area that plays a key role in processing and regulating emotion like fear, empathy, and rapid decision making. So this study ultimately concluded that atypical functional connectivity result in an altered perception of body state awareness and abnormal meaning assignments towards certain sounds, which causes patients with misophonia to misinterpret trigger sounds in a way that they perceive it as threatening or toxic, even if they are not a threatening sound. So in conclusion, people with misophonia experience more negative reactions toward auditory or visual triggers, while ASMR induces relaxing and positive reactions toward the triggers. The part of brain that was elicited due to both conditions are also different, where misophonia elicit response in the anterior insula, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, while people with ASMR were elicited at the part of cingulate gyrus, right paracentral lobule, and bilateral thalamus. So, nevertheless, further research is required to investigate the correlation between ASMR and misophonia. So I think that's all from me. Thank you. Have a nice day.